welcome to Offsite Dirt. We're back with more high performance build. This is Mark Wille. I'm joined with Shaun St Amour, Joe Konopacki. Shaun, kick us off.
All right, everybody, great to have you back. We're going to take a deeper dive because one of the things that Joe does is he gets to go to sites and he does some investigating. He's got a whole bunch of tools he's going to talk about. But again, it's funny what you can just, once you look at a building, once you know what you see things. And of course, once you see it, you never go back. So, Joe, why don't we dive into a site visit that you've done recently and start talking about what we can see with our naked eyes and say, hey, I think we got some potential problems that need some fixing. So maybe some retrofitting, some upgrades, adding some high performance materials and concepts to it. Let's have a deeper dive.
Great. Thanks, Shaun. Thanks, Mark. Yeah. So sometimes we can see things right as we pull up to the house, right? So, if we're looking at, the front of a home, I don't know if you guys can see that screen, the front of the house there, right? So we pull up, hop back a few steps, take a quick photo. You can see the picture or the pattern of snow melt or that frost on the roof. That is telling us a world of information right there, right? Where the frost is thickest, right? That's where there's least amount of heat loss. And where there is no frost, that's where you've got the most amount of heat loss, right? So this is the poor man's infrared, right? Anybody can do this. Just you just got to be early riser. Get out of bed. When you go walk the dog, turn around, take a look at your house, snap a few photos, and share that with your energy auditor when they come around. Because this is gold right here. This tells me unequivocally where heat is leaving the house and melting that frost on the roof. It's a super subtle signal. This is like 2 or 3 degrees difference, right? This is not like 15 degrees. This is 2 or 3 degrees difference in surface temperature when you see stuff like this. And once we went into this house and we actually measure up the home, we create a 3D rendering with SketchUp. You guys can see that, the kind of that wireframe image there, right? And so take a look at that area. This was like a master bathroom. And so there's a little flat ceiling over the closets, but there was vaulted, cathedral ceilings, in that slope, little flat. So there's a lot of, crazy little geometry in here, right? And when it comes to air sealing a home, these, walls that are, highlighted orange have to be sealed to everything that's, adjoining that. So, when we do a report, we'll, create one of these 3D images. We'll highlight areas that are orange because no matter what your native language is, everybody understands pictures, right? Yeah. So here, everything that's orange needs to be air sealed, right? Pretty clear, in sending that message along. But when we go back to what that pattern of snow melt looked like, you can see, where we had kind of those open attic spaces that, where the orange, vertical walls were our boundary between conditioned and unconditioned space. We had a lot of heat loss there. And you can see that reflected, the geometry that we measured up, kind of as a 1-to-1 match with what we're seeing with the snow melt there.
So again, in the image there, again, the garage is taken out. So the garage is not part of the thermal area. It's not part of the air tightness. That's exactly. So where you've got the mouse, that's where the garage is. Now we're diving into that space above the garage and how you can see from the real life to the model, which is really cool to see the different faces.
Yeah. And this is one of those areas we learn about these things over time as we test multiple homes. There's a rim and band joist, air boundary between the first floor and the second floor, right? So this is where the first the joists that are the floor system of the second floor intersect, the garage. And if this isn't air sealed, you effectively have garage air that finds its way into the floor system of the second floor. And think about the air quality in your garage. Nobody goes to the garage for a breath of fresh air, right? And stack effect is literally sucking that air up into the house as warm air, rises. And, that band joist, that kind of the light blue band joist that we highlighted there, is a significant area of air intrusion in the house. So a lot of times existing homes need that ceiling cut open so that they can get to that area and seal that off to stop that air leakage.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
most people are parking their cars there. I mean, I'm drying out my hockey gear. We don't want any of those smells, any of those gases getting in our houses. So this is a really important detail for all
yeah,
of us to clearly
yeah,
understand about ensuring that we're keeping the garage space away from our internal
yeah.
comfort space.
Yeah. So again, part of the evaluations we're doing is for, obviously for comfort and efficiency, but health and safety becomes a big deal. And it's sometimes really surprising how connected an attached garage is to the rest of the house. I mean, fine, we want to keep the weather off our cars, that's cool, but the air should not flow between the garage and the house like it flows between a bedroom and a bathroom or a hallway or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
we want the air in the garage very well separated from the rest of the house. And so when we're doing an evaluation on the home, not only are we identifying what is the conditioned, boundary of the house, but how much leakage do we have between the house and the garage, between the house and the attic above. And that helps, the folks that are going to follow us are the contractors that are going to do air sealing and insulating. And so we're effectively giving them that targeted air sealing list about, these are the areas that really need to be addressed first, second, third, right? And health and well-being is always going to, top the list. We want to make sure that people are generally in good health before they're comfortable, right? I want you to be comfortable, but if you got a headache, if you're getting sick, if you've got, respiratory issues or whatnot, it doesn't matter how comfortable you are,
Yeah, Joe, I
so.
really like how you frame it from a safety standpoint. I mean, a lot of times we talk about the energy efficiency of doing these higher performing type techniques. Then we dive into, comfort and health. But when you look at it from an aspect of safety, especially in these older buildings, because they've got gas and combustion type things and having those kind of concerns, it's a really good image that you provide. Especially now you look at the real life images and you can tell some interesting stories. So explain what we're seeing now.
This is that same home. This is just the back side of it. So again, we can kind of see different snow, patterns of frost melt. Here we're seeing that there's a melt just above the eave. So this is your top plate, this exterior wall there, that top plate is not sealed. So the air in this wall is leaking up and melting this frost right along the edge. Nothing crazy, but it's happening. We've got some, intersection here where the buildings intersect that are melting a bunch of snow. And then this weird little geometries, variation here. And when we measured the inside of the house, when we modeled it, here's where we had these weird little offsets, right? And anytime the geometry gets complicated, there's a likelihood of air leaks, right? Just, the ceiling didn't get air sealed to the wall properly, and I say this in a joke, but there's some serious, I think there's some truth to it. When buildings were built in the last, handful of decades, the standard was, is water getting in? No. Are squirrels getting in? No. Okay, it's tight enough, right? No water, no squirrels. What else am I doing? So you could have big air leaks to an attic and nobody would really even think twice about it because, like, what's the big deal? It's just house to attic, right? Well, there's no water getting in, there's no squirrels getting in. What are you beefing about, right? And then nobody really had appreciation of the fact that for all that air that's leaking out through the attic, you've got an equal amount of draft air that's coming in the house. That's sucking away your comfort, that's taking away your comfortable humidity in the wintertime, and it's replacing with cool, dry air that you've got to pay to reheat and rehumidify, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I understand why it wasn't on people's radar because, air is pretty tricky to see, right? So, but the fact
Speaking
of the
of,
matter is we have the tools to find it nowadays. And so we can find those areas and we can literally lay them out on a map, right? Right here in this 3D image, the surfaces that are orange, we need to treat them in this way so they don't leak air anymore.
hey, Joe, speaking of obvious, I want to do a little playful test. If you could go to that rear photo of the house. Right. Okay. So here's a test because I haven't been there. You've been there. You've walked the site in and out. I don't know. How many hours were you on this project, Joe? In person.
Probably 3 or 4. There's probably
Got it.
two of us there for 3 or 4 hours to, really try to understand what's going on there.
So on the top of the house, we're seeing skylights, right? And we hope that they're not leaking. Otherwise, there would be this little thing called water. There might be some condensation going on, but we're hoping they're not leaking water in or air. But on the top of the attic, we see the attic vents, and that's making sense. Then we see the white pipe, which is probably a sanitary vent, right? Stack. And then there's a furnace stack next to it, which is probably the furnace for the upstairs or maybe the whole house. I don't know.
This was the whole house in this case, yeah.
Okay. And then there's a fireplace, be it wood or otherwise. So we know that there is a garage air machine, right? Because so I'm guessing, Joe, that there's a bathroom upstairs. I'm guessing the bathroom upstairs has an exhaust vent.
Yep.
So when the exhaust vent is on, that is potentially pulling air in from above the garage through those leaks.
Yeah, that would be here.
Got it.
This is the
But
garage area.
Perfect. But there's no fresh air machine, right?
Not in this house. The
So
fresh air machine was Mother Nature and all the accidental holes left behind by the builders.
which in this case is a good thing.
For air quality, it's a plus.
Yeah.
For comfort and efficiency, and maybe not. Well, actually, I shouldn't say for air quality because it really depends. If all your air leaks are straight to outside, it's not so bad. If your air leaks are to your garage, that's not great. Right. So again, that's all homes are similar and everyone is unique. And this house uniquely had a lot of connection to the garage.
So for everyone, this is really fun. Believe it or not, these are the conversations that we have on a Saturday night, right? And so this is not a passing of judgment. This is a review and assessment of what we're seeing on the building. And because we're with Joe, we've known that he sees these, that he's seen this, but we're taking that. And I have to say, my favorite thing about this is that we're looking at that attic floor, Joe, right there with the red line, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we're looking at a red square in the middle. So that, I have to think, is the spot that I climbed through to put in Christmas ornaments and old college beer signs.
I thought that's where you go to hang out with the squirrels. Hey, squirrel, you in there?
It is a comfy place for mice and rodents. That is in fact the attic hatch. And yeah, talk about low hanging fruit. You know, if you could throw a couple 6 inches of foam board on your attic hatch, I'm sorry, 2 inches. Put 2 inches of foam board on your attic hatch and some weather strip on that thing to make it airtight. So when the cover sits, it's air. Just the weight of it is making an airtight seal to some simple weather strip. That right there is bang for your buck. Yeah. I mean, as simple as that is, it's a shame that more people don't do it. It'll pay for itself in months in some cases.
And it's funny you say that because, then we start looking at that good, better, and best. And you can go for, okay, you know what, instead of just 2, you could, you already bought a sheet of foam. Why don't you just add a couple more, just add the PL glue and keep stacking it up. And then maybe you're like, hey, you're at the building supply store, get a couple of latches, get those on there just to make sure it stays nice and tight. Like, it doesn't take much to improve these things. But again, those low hanging fruits that you indicated, it's like, what is that system? Oh, it's there. Oh, by the way, that thing that's there is the attic hatch and it's a leaky sieve into, a very critical area. We talk about these nighttime cooling effects where all of a sudden, you hear raindrops in the morning, and it's because you got that moist air that got into those spaces. So really interesting detail. Again, like I like the red line showcasing another critical path. And I mean, when I look at this particular picture, I just see the corners. There are so many corners. And yet, if we look at minimizing the corners and putting all the jewelry, like all the architectural stuff that we love, like, as we're dealing with high performance, we cannot take away that our buildings need to look good. If our buildings look good, we will take care of them. But the fact, like, a lot of the jewelry could be outside of the thermal envelope and not have these potentials. Like, every corner there is more wood, which means more thermal bridges, which means more chance of air leakage. There's a whole combination of things here. I mean, the model looks amazing because we're geeking out on the details here. But again, it's, when we're looking at designing things in the future, how do we just tweak things from affordability? How do we tweak things for an easier design that can help out with the continuity and ensure that, we don't have to scratch our head and think, uh-oh, squirrel, look out, careful now. Like, these are those fun things that we just got to take care of.
I had a guy that was a mentor for a while when I was younger, and his saying was, fancy gets broke, right? So the more complicated you try to make something, the more likely it's going to go sideways on you. And I think this little master bathroom area on this house is a good example of, they wanted to get fancy. Look at all these surfaces you've got, and it's hard to get all those air sealed and insulated, very well. Not impossible, but just harder, right? And so the more simple you can make this space, right? If all of this from this top slope all the way down was just one big cathedral, and then you created some little partition framing, to kind of box that out, you want to make some superficial soffit to that, that's fine. But my main air barrier would be this entire cathedral slope, right? Take this wall across the entire back, just make that, one simple knee wall of a fixed height and seal the back of it, right? So simplifying things on new construction is a gold, right? Just simple has a really great chance of being done well. Not, you could still screw it up, but it's like a really good chance of being done well. When we do existing homes, I tell you what, man, the level of difficulty goes up exponentially, because now effectively what you're saying is, here's what you got. Now make this, with these constraints, make this as good as it could be.
Yeah.
Right. And that, I think that in some ways is a lot harder than saying, hey, design a new house. Well, geez, I got a blank screen. I got a blank sheet of paper. I can do whatever I want. Right. But go into a house that was built 36 years ago, and say, how do I level this place up? How do we cost effectively take this building enclosure and improve it to the point where they can downsize their heating and cooling equipment, downsize their energy use, and eventually make it so that the energy diet of this building enclosure is so low that we can put a handful of solar panels on top of it and run the entire thing off of energy that's being generated on site. The grid goes down, you can still potentially power what your usage is because your usage is so low, right? So I think, for me personally, I think energy efficiency is the first step towards that resiliency, in the grid. I don't want the grid to go down, but if it does, I don't want everything in my freezer melting.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
All right, Joe. Well, great stuff again. I loved how we dove into keeping air, the right air where it needs to be. Then we dove into some squirrels. Again, squirrels we want to keep out of our buildings, as well as we talked about resiliency. And I mean, such an interesting aspect of, when we make the right decisions to improve the hope and performance, understanding the building science principles and how things affect, we then get into a high performance build. And then that wraps it up for another edition on Offsite Dirt. I'm Shaun St Amour. We got Joe Konopacki and we got Mark Wille. Enjoy us. Hope you enjoyed the show and get ready for another episode coming up real soon. Take care, everybody. Build better.